Well, good day, everyone. It's Still Cops, and we are back. Now, before we get on to the next episode, I'm just going to mention thank you to everybody that's contacted us recently in relation to Zach Rolfe and also other matters. We will get back to you shortly. However, we have far more pushing matters at hand. The other thing is, when this gets released tomorrow, the 18th of October, we will be at the Gold Coast Tavern. Come down and see us at midday. We're doing a live show and there's plenty of drinks on hand. But, mate, I am going to pass on to Damo, who's going to introduce Zach again for this next episode.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And just on those comments too, we really appreciate it because there's been heaps and we always aim to get back to everybody. And our actual plan, there's quite a few directed at Zach. So the plan is we do another episode where we have a Q&A with Zach. So all those questions, we can read them out and Zach will answer them. So if you've got any questions for Zach relating to any part of this matter, let us know because Zach will answer it. You get it from the horse's mouth, literally. So it's a good opportunity there if you've got a pressing question. I know that a lot of serving police have got questions. So, but yeah, welcome back, mate. How you going?
How you going? Good, thanks, boys. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to have you back, mate. And we appreciate your time, mate, because I know you're a busy man. But we're up to, what are we now? Episode 4 of this series, and we've moved past. So we're up to 5. Holy jeez, there you go. So we're up to episode 5. I can't count very well. I've got a head that looks like this. But so last time, what we spoke about was obviously the Supreme Court trial, a level of stress that I can't comprehend, just quietly. So going through all of that, the finding of not guilty. All of that came out, the feelings involved in that. And then we just basically back and forth our feelings about what goes on in the police force. You know, there's some things happening in the police, and it's not just the NT. There's problems everywhere. But I think we all agree that the men and women on the ground are doing the best they can in the circumstances they've got. There's a lot of people in higher ranks tearing their hair out. There's political interference. We know all of this. We're not negative people. We're all very positive people, but you've got to be honest and you've got to face those realities. And I think we're going to face them again this episode, Zach. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon so, boys. Yeah. Again, even just going deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yep.
Yeah, so, mate, obviously it was 2022. Was it March 2022? You found not guilty in the Supreme Court in Darwin?
Yeah, March 2022. Then it took me a number of months to actually get back to work. That was because I was suspended again, and once we figured it out, the actual reason was the leave issue. Got back to work, but when I got back up to Darwin, that's where I'm put in an office. Not in a police station, I'm put in an office in the city, and basically had no real work tasks. No return to work program was given to me. I'm basically just sitting there for 8 hours a day. Basically just twiddling my thumbs. It took me a couple of days to do those annual online courses to get back on. And then I was in there for a while. And during this time, all those complaints that had been made against me internally throughout the investigation process and the trial process, they were all dealt with. And we'll say all, maybe all but one, potentially. But nearly all of them, including the internal investigation regarding the shooting, were dealt with while I was in that office. The outcome of all of them were remedial guidance. So we know this, but for the people listening, remedial guidance is it basically means you've gone through an internal investigation process, you've found to have done nothing that reaches the level of requiring discipline. And it's like, I think they described it as a assertive conversation between you and your senior, your boss at the time. That's what it is. So you haven't done anything wrong. So even for the shooting after the trial, after facing 25 years, the police resolved that investigation internally with an email to me of remedial guidance regarding all aspects of the shooting. Which to me doesn't make sense, right? You go on one end, I'm arrested for murder, facing 25 years in jail, and the final result is an email of remedial guidance. Doesn't make sense to me. It came up in the Coronial later, and again, they skimmed over it. But that's what occurred while I was in Darwin. After a little while there, obviously that was killing me, just having no purpose, sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day with nothing to do. At some point, and I don't know what month it started, sometime in 2022, the Coronial started, or the build up to the Coronial really started. And I read the final police Coronial report. So we talked about last time we got our hands on the draft report written by Scott Pollock, who was then removed from the case. And obviously I'd read that draft and the drafts around that. But then when I was sitting in Darwin and I read the final report into that the police were submitting to the Coronial, that's when I kind of really I didn't lose it, but that was my day where I walked out of work that day because I saw in that report obviously I saw the initial versions, which were kind of again, Scott Pollock said that this was the most biased investigation he'd ever been a part of. The bias was against me. He basically tore apart a lot of the experts and a lot of the evidence against me, including the fact that a lot of the experts weren't given the full evidence. But then the final report was so different, was so 180 degrees different than that it even went to lengths to kind of support the investigators involved and say how hard done by they were because it was so hard on them. Rather than obviously Pollock's was kind of the opposite of that. So I could see where it was going at that point. There was also a lot of arguments about what the scope would be of the Coronial. And the Coronial was obviously to look into the cause and circumstances of the death of Kumanjai Walker. The scope that was being argued for was so wide and so out there that basically from my view, my team's view, and a lot of other people's views, it was just basically going to end up being a royal commission into me, not looking at the actual what occurred. So that on top of the report kind of gave me, I was done with it. I could kind of already see where it was going, that it was just going to be we couldn't get Rolfe in the trial, so we're going to get him in the Coronial. It's going to be a second bite of the apple. So I kind of lost it then. I wrote a letter because I'd made all these complaints internally about the what I'd seen as issues in the investigation. Wrote them internally. I'd complained to ICAC. It had all been kind of cleared, covered up in a weird way. So then I went to who you can go to when it can't get handled properly. I went to the media and I wrote a letter to the media basically just outlining my views of the circumstances at the time in regard to the police commissioner, the way he handled the investigation and the way the coroner was handling the Coronial. And this was in 2022, and basically I read it again the other day, the letter, because I couldn't remember what I wrote. I read it again and I was like, it's nearly like I just told the future. If you read that letter now, I was talking about how biased it was going to be, what their findings were going to be, how they're going to find them. And that ended up actually being the point that they used to dismiss me from the NT Police Force, that letter. So they dismissed me from the police force. I returned to Canberra. And then I guess at some point the Coronial started, but the Coronial went on. It only finished in this year. It went for over 3 years, I think, if I'm correct. It just went on for so long. So it's hard to even get to where it started. But one of the biggest issues of contention was the text messages. So this is what the Coronial really, really focused down on. Text messages they got from my phone between me and some of the boys privately. And this is a question because I don't deny texting what I texted, and we can talk about that later. I've never shied away from it, but if we're talking from a police perspective and evidence perspective, this is another situation involved in the investigation which has never really been openly dealt with. It's just been another kind of sweep to the side. So when I got arrested, obviously my possessions get taken off me, and they get put in the property box behind the watch house keeper's desk. I had my phone on me at the time of the arrest, and my phone is then put in the property box. And when I got bailed, my phone is no longer there, and there's a receipt there saying that the police have taken my phone. So when we figured out how and why, the police used the power of Section 144. So the power to like seize an item in the immediate possession of a person that has been used in the commission of an offence. I think that's the basically that's the wording of Section 144. So there's some like issues in that already. Like one, not in my immediate possession, but that's kind of like, that's petty, here nor there. Used in the commission of offence, like how was my phone used in the commission of an offence, the offence being murder? And he could say, because I used my personal phone to hold up to Kumjai Walker's face to help identify him, because I hadn't given a work phone. I'd been given a work iPad, which is just too clunky to hold around. So you could say, I guess the argument could be, well, it was used in order to identify Kumjai Walker, but the police and the DPP have put forward themselves that the first shot wasn't justified. Therefore, it's not really using that offence. What's happened later is for 12 months, the police have sat on my phone and they haven't been able to crack it. Randomly, there's some cop, I believe he was part of the Coronial investigation team. He was going through all my body-worn videos of my whole career that was still available. And at some point, he found a body-worn video where you could see me putting my passcode into my phone. Mm-hmm. He's then passed that information on. They've used my passcode to get into my phone, and then they've downloaded the whole contents of the phone. That police officer and another police officer, so one from the crim team, I believe, one from the Coronial team, they went through my phone, and this is because we've had a minor hearing about this, but we never got to the end part of that hearing because I got dismissed. Both their evidence is this, that they went through my phone for like basically a week before the shooting and for the few days after the shooting until I got arrested. They found nothing relating to the offence. So then they went through everything. So if you're still using 144, once that you get to that point where you found nothing related to that offence, if you're even cleared by the immediate obstructions we talked about before, once you say in your statement that you found nothing relating to the offence, you have to, you can't go through that phone anymore. You don't have as far as I'm aware, you don't have an open ability to take someone's phone regardless of the offence they've committed or been alleged to have committed and just go through it. There was no warrant involved. There never has been. So that was a big issue with the phone, which has never been dealt with because the coroner herself said that she doesn't need to really deal with the lawfulness of the evidence, that even if it was received unlawfully, she could still use it. So I guess with the 144 thing, and again, because it's never been really strung out because I got dismissed, so it just didn't get through the full internal hearing, that's how the text messages came about. So I think I would love to hear your views, because you guys obviously were in that world and getting warrants for people's phones and downloading the phones and stuff like that. Is that, I know we do things a bit differently in the NT, but is that a normal way of going through someone's phone, or should it be if it's not, kind of thing?
Mate, my experience with using phones was a lot to do with drug work. So it's a tricky one here because we're giving away a bit of methodology, but I don't think anyone's so silly that they don't understand that we can take information off phones. So what would happen quite a bit was that we would seize phones, especially in relation to drug work, which I did a lot of in Catherine. And the reason we'd seize phones was also, it's evidence of the dealing. So basically, there's text messages on a phone that can indicate, yeah, bro, you're holding. Yeah, I'm holding. What do you need? This back and forth with a client of them with drug dealing. But I mean, that's direct evidence of supply. It's got nothing to do with a coronial outcome. I mean, the other thing is here, the phone work wasn't used in the criminal matter, but the trouble is, there is discretionary powers that the coroner has, and they're pretty broad. So the trouble is, she can kind of, at that point anyway, under the current way that, because what we need to make really clear to people who don't really know how the system works is there's an enormous difference between a criminal trial and a coronial inquest. So a coronial inquest, the evidence gathered in a coronial inquest is not there to put anybody in prison, take away their liberty. A coronial inquest is to work out what happened, Was everything done correctly, and can things be changed in the future? Basically, is there anything that we can do that will prevent a similar thing in the future? So that's a coronial outcome, basically, and it's a lot to do with the circumstances of the death. So you can draw that bow as long as you want, basically, which to me is not real good, because they're also protected under defamation laws, which would mean everyone's got the right to privacy. Like, I've said words in the past that are I challenge any human being on earth to go through every text they've ever sent, every word they've ever said, and said, is there anything you've ever said or text or anything like that that you wouldn't want your grandmother to hear? And I reckon every single one of them would come up with, oh, Christ, yeah. Most of what I bloody say to me mates, I wouldn't want them to hear. It's called privacy. It's privacy. The other thing is, it's when it comes to seizing someone's phone, it's a very intimate, very personal thing. Like there's stuff on phones that's just out of control. There's a reason why partners break up when someone won't give them access to the phone, because what are you hiding? Like, it's a very private thing. So, we're human beings, things go on. But when it comes to the legality of it, the honest answer is, I don't think most lawyers would exactly know this, because if it was used in the Supreme Court trial, that's a piece of piss. Dismissed. No way. It is what we call poison tree. That any evidence that you seize, if it's not done lawfully, it's not admissible in court. You can't possibly use it. In criminal court, there's a big difference. So, but in the coroner's court, the coroner has the discretion to include any evidence that may formulate their outcome on the cause of death of the person. So, mate, it's one of those very tricky. And I mean, I don't have oh God, we used to have big legislative conversations in CIB offices about this stuff. Quite a bit. Sit down and break down words and go, and or. Like, words mean stuff. So and or and things like that. They're very important little words there. So this would be one of those. We would have a trial within a trial, basically, to work out if something's legal or not. It's called a voir dire. We would have little police officer voir dires in the office all the time and go, is this shit, were we right here? Is this right? We did it all the time. Yeah. So talking about the legality, I mean, I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I've been involved in a lot of criminal and coronial. I've done a lot of coronial work. So that's where I kind of, mate, after all of those words I just spat out of my head, my answer is I don't know. Like, I don't know. Yeah. And I don't know. But, sorry, Schultzy, you go.
Yeah, mate. Look, the only thing I'm looking at, okay, the phone was seized. Okay, so people got to put their justifications as to why, what they want to obtain, when they want to obtain it, and all that sort of thing. That is impartial to any, like, criminal investigation, as Damo was saying. But, and look, correct me if I'm wrong. However, so if you do a search warrant, it doesn't matter what you're searching for. Once that's completed, you cannot then once you've found what you're looking for, it's then done. If you're saying it's like a week or a week afterwards, you can't then expand outside. It's not allowed. What you've justified is what you can look at, and that's what people need to understand. When you do a search warrant, once you found what you found, everything else is negated. If you find something in the commission of finding what you find, then you need another search warrant. So that, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it.
So I'll take you back to drug matters. So say we seize a phone under warrant, or we seize it off their person under 144. So we go back and we're now going through their phone for whatever reason. We can, if we can open it, we can look at it. There's no issue with tricky ways of getting access codes or anything like that. That's, don't get me wrong, they went to a hell of a bloody length to get it, but we would often get them, and we would often open phones up. I think there's probably legal argument around that, because to me it would be get a warrant to access the data on the phone, and then it must be opened, and in not providing that is an offence in itself. So I think going back to drug work, what we would do is seize a phone, take it back, go through it, find information. Hey, you just got raided, bro. Like, yeah, it's all sweet, man. They didn't find all the gear out the back. Right. So we go back now with fresh information that we've got with another search warrant, and we go back and then check out the back, in inverted commas, and you found it. But that's fresh information for a new search warrant. And also, I've said the word search warrant. Like, we've got lawful authority now, so we've got to really, the rules are there and they're very strict, and they have to be like that, because, you want to live in a world where you're free. The government can't just come and stand on your face. So you've got to have information and all the rest of it. So, So I think my argument with this is why they used the information, how they got the information. Look, I don't know. Obviously, criminal, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can't use any of that in criminal court. It doesn't. There's nothing there that can prove guilt or not. It's completely irrelevant to the alleged offence, but which they're alleging murder. So that's the alleged offence. It's completely irrelevant to that. So therefore, the evidence is gone. But when it comes to a coronial inquest, there's massive discretionary powers of the coroner. So I think that's my point.
Exactly. There. I think that's, and I think we all agree, like at least the legal team agree with the coroner's point that it doesn't matter how she came about that evidence. My issue, I guess, is with how the police acted. Is that they, even if you got through those first initial hoops, you're able to seize the phone on that power. You're able to look into it. You're able to once you get to that point where you've determined that we have taken it under 144. And then we get to that point where we've looked at it and we haven't found anything relevant to the offence, boom. Even if you get through all those hoops, you should cut it there. What happened then was what I found the most aggravating part of the whole process was that invasion of privacy. Not because if it was a nameless, faceless AFP cop, I don't know. What happened was my contents of my phone then got downloaded and shared around to a large number of people. Within the police force and the parties of the Coronial. But regardless, that's how they got my phone. And I don't shy away. I sent some text messages with some racial slurs. And my evidence in the Coronial was, hey, I've sent more than what you've shown, but about other races, about my own race more than anyone else. I've talked playground language rubbish. I think we can all agree that exactly what we've said. We've all said things that could make people's toes curl. And then I think we all look at ourselves, and when you say something personally, you go, well, I was joking. But when you look at someone else, you go, well, they must mean something else. It's like what I think we talked about before was what people do these days is they give empathy to those that they're on side with, and they give agency to those that they're not on side with. So for what occurred here was from the coroner, from the coroner's counsel, I got agency. I was responsible for everything I did, but no empathy. Walker, we'll get into it. All the empathy, no agency. Mm-hmm. That's how we got to it. So we ended up getting to the text messages were just such a big part of the Coronial throughout the whole period. That's why we had to get into that a little bit. So again, the Coronial should have been a part about should have been an investigation into what occurred and basically a massive debrief. What occurred, what went right, so what went good, what went bad and we need to fix, what went okay and we can improve. That's what it should have been. Basically for me, there was never going to be any real consequences of the Coronial except for reputation because I'd already been charged and cleared. But immediately again, once the Coronial started, because I and again, I admit it, the media have reported it the whole time, that I fought giving evidence the whole entire process because I could see what was going to occur. The whole time I could see that it was just going to be a hit job. And there was no need for me to give evidence. They had 3 days of me giving evidence in the trial, which they could use, transcript. I'd been cross-examined for 2 days in the criminal trial. They had all the body on video. They had all my phone downloads, which they could base their report off anyway. They didn't need me to sit in that box. And the only reason I eventually got called, and this is my view, was so that each one of those legal teams, those legal parties, could try and have their chance to get an ounce of flesh. It was just because all the evidence I gave, none of it was used. They had their narrative. They wanted to try and embarrass me for the week or the 10 days that I gave evidence there, I think. The 7 days, I think. And then they steered the shit back. So when the Coronial finally properly started, we'd had some tips, legal tips here and there about what the scope could be, and basically we lost it all. The scope was completely open to whatever she wanted. She started the Coronial, I believe, by going out to Yuendamu with her team and some media. She got herself painted up with the community, and she had a bit of a truth-telling, they called it, situation out there. During this is the very start of the Coronial, and there's footage of it, and my legal team requested the full footage, and we've never got it. We've got redacted versions. because you can see there's a whiteboard behind the coroner out there with some issues listed on it. And one of the issues they discussed is the community was unhappy that a judge from Canberra was brought up to be used in the criminal trial that cleared me. They believed there was some form of corruption there within that, and they requested that they wanted the judge to be speared and myself to be speared. Now, we had issues with this because the coroner and the coroner's counsel didn't put a stop to it and go, well, criminal trial was legit. We can't mess with the outcome. They said, oh, no, we'll look into it. We'll see why he was appointed, all this and that. So immediately we had issues with how it was being handled. But then we come back, go into a courtroom, and we actually start receiving evidence. The most telling thing about how the coronial started was the very first cop that gave evidence, who I've never met, never had anything to do with them. The very first cop, the cop after her, the next 10 cops. Again, this is the very first few weeks of the coronial. Every one of those cops got presented with my text messages, the worst of my text messages, and asked kind of how they felt about them. But asked in a leading way anyway. They're disgusting, aren't they? They're this, aren't they? They're this, aren't they? And the reason I believe that was done was to set the scene for the media. So the media knew which path we're going down, and the media could eat it up. So immediately the coronial started with Zach Rolfe is a racist cop who killed an Aboriginal man. And that's the path the coronial started on. And then that's how the path went down. Because if you were if you're really investigating what occurred, the only person relevant to those text messages is me.
Mm-hmm.
So ask me about it, or ask the person I sent them to.
Yep.
But they got them out there as soon as they possibly could, and that set the scene in the media, and that's the narrative we pushed. The police basically started the coronial with the argument that basically that I was a bad cop, that I was racist, that I was sexist, that I was a misogynistic narcissist, and they're using all the keywords, which immediately you just go, what are you, you're saying nothing. Lazy. So they just said that I'm racist, sexist, misogynistic, narcissistic cop that's gone rogue. That was the narrative that the police pushed. And remember, they used the same brief of evidence that Pollock had come to the conclusion was that this was the most biased investigation against me he'd ever seen. That same brief was put forward by the police to the coroner. The use of force, the anti-use of force guy that was torn apart by Pollock and in the crim trial, he was automatically used, in the coronial, or the coroner and the coroner's counsel accepted his evidence as if it was proper truth.
Possible. So
there's all these issues throughout the whole way. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, there's so much to go off, but there's just it was basically this. The narrative was already set, and then all the coronial was a process of solidifying that narrative. And there was a few people that didn't. There was a few people that went in there and gave honest evidence. And if you looked at that, the way that they got treated, the way that they got examined versus those who were happy to toe the line, they got torn apart. They had some really, really hard days in the box. So again, the narrative was heavily this. The narrative was that Kumanjai Walker broke out of Kapu to attend his grandfather's funeral, and then we know the rest. The local cops tried to arrest him. He attacked him with the axe. Then I went out there, sent out there, but the narrative was that I had gone rogue, basically. What was interesting, though, was that, again, in the coronial, the way it started, and I know we've got a lot of issues up in the NT, and this is one that hasn't been spoken about enough, is that the issues with some of these communities is that women especially, victims of domestic violence or witnesses to domestic violence, are afraid to speak out. Because if they speak out, there's the risk that occurs commonly is that they'll return home and then they'll be assaulted or they'll suffer consequences for speaking out. The Coroner's Counsel even... she spoke about this at the start of the coronial and said that this was an issue within the case. Now, there's things I can imagine you could do to address that, such as having closed court sessions for some witnesses. But that never occurred because Walker's partner at the time, who was as part of the family safety framework, there was significant fears for her safety, even her life, by not only the NT police, but a number of other organisations, to the point where there was a plan in place to try and remove her from the NT and a family member for her own safety to protect her from Kumanjai. She spent the last day of Kumanjai's life with him, and she was not called as a witness. And again, her evidence earlier on was that they didn't go to the funeral that day. Her evidence earlier on was that he didn't break out of Kapu to, this was amongst her and some others, that he didn't break out of Kapu to attend the funeral. He broke up because he was talking to a number of other teenage girls. They convinced him to break out. Because we know that a few days after that, before the axe incident, he'd attempted to hand himself in with the support of with the help of a support worker that he'd been seeing throughout his life. That support worker went and saw him in Alice Springs, but refused to assist him returning himself to Kapu. She was then called as evidence, and this is an insane thing. She's a support worker. Good job, honourable job. You're trying to help people. But her evidence is basically she read a book. The book is called The Body Keeps the Score by some Dutch guy, I think. I've read it. It's a pretty good book, but she read a book. And then she gave evidence that was treated as if she was an expert in psychology and trauma because she'd read a book. So again, like what we talk about in a criminal trial, like the evidence that was accepted by the coroner, some like you go, I'm going to accept this person's evidence based off nothing because it fits the narrative. Someone else over here doesn't fit the narrative, not going to accept the evidence. So there was no investigation occurring. It was just solidifying the narrative. And what I found really damaging from the whole process, because again, like I can take it, whatever, to me, was that it seemed that if the Coronial team attempted to attack me for so long, just by constant like text messages and character references and all this kind of stuff, when that was no longer effective, they tried to attack my friends and my people and the people that supported me and the police officers that supported me. Not only that, they damaged the community by the Coroner's Counsel assisting, who is on the chair of a domestic violence board in Sydney. She spoke about this relationship between Kumanjai and his partner at the time, and she nearly brushes over the violence that was imposed upon her. And says that, there were some hardships, but it was because of generational trauma. It was because of his life cycle. And I think we talked about this before, was that what we see in the NT so much is the infantilization of Indigenous. You kind of get to the point where and it shouldn't be accepted, because everyone knows that everyone's human. And we know that everyone in the NT basically we're all humans, and unless you've got like a severe mental health issue, we all know what's right and wrong. Mm. The fact that you can nearly get like just like a lack of consequence or a lack of responsibility for breaking your missus' arm with a metal bar, hitting her in the rock, kicking the shit out of her in public, in front of family, let alone what happened behind closed doors, and be treated like you're a good guy for that. But then, then I was demonized for some words that I texted privately. So it was just strange like that. And I found that, like, if we're going to go down that path, I found that very unprofessional, let's say the R word, racist, because you're treating Indigenous like to a lower standard of humanity based on their behaviour kind of thing. Like, that's what I saw in the Coronial. I'm probably jumping to and from stuff, but just so much stuff happened. Then, because I'm just sitting back this whole time trying, like, basically not fighting, giving evidence, and the Coronial is still ongoing. They call in some police again, and it goes to the same point as before. Often in the communities, I think probably in most communities in the NT, there's got an ACPO, an Aboriginal Community Police Officer. And we know ACPOs are just cops like the rest of us. We all just normal dudes and girls with a job. Mm. You can be good at your job or you can be shit at your job. I've got no qualm saying that I worked with some really good ACPOs. I worked with really good cops and some really shit cops and some really shit ACPOs. What came from the Coronial was basically, whether or not it was because they were ACPO or because they were on the right side of the narrative, was that the ACPOs that were brought in were basically treated as like, unicorns. And you can look at the transcript and see it. Like the coroner's counsel basically kisses their feet. There's no investigation into the ACPO out there, and the ACPO has such a substantial position. My basic thing was if anyone was judged the same standard that I was judged, they would have been torn to shreds because there was an ACPO involved who's a known domestic violence offender. And if you're looking at this case really and going to look back and see what led to this, what led to that, one of the big issues is the domestic violence in Yuendamu and other communities in the NT, and why that's a thing and what can be done about it. But if we have an ACPO in a community who is a known domestic violence, and we know they're a domestic violence offender, and this isn't because they're Indigenous, because police in the NT, we know police of all races in the NT who have committed acts of domestic violence, who have maintained their job. Some have been moved into professional standards command. And I'm not saying it's covered up, I'm saying it's being dealt with in a way that's moved them into that position. But if you have a ACPO in a community where there's a history of distrust between the community and the police, then you put someone in this position of power who's supposed to be that bridge. Because if you can't trust the police, you're supposed to be able to trust the ACPO. If that ACPO is a known domestic violence offender, you got domestic violence victims in the community, who can they go to? There's already got concerns that if they speak up, they're going to receive payback from other community members. They're distrustful of police because of the history potentially. And if you got no one to go to, but that really reinforced the problem that I'm talking about, which isn't in every community, but in some, this Coronial really reinforced those issues. It kind of martyred criminality, put criminality on a pedestal, like empowered criminality and really disempowered police and the ability to deal with it. Because even if you go back to the text messages, and we probably all have the same defense. We talk shit, we didn't mean it, we were joking, shouldn't have said it, but it was privately, and between the people that we discussed, we all knew it didn't mean anything. We all have the same kind of defense for that. But now police, I know, and it's an outlet in a way. You have an outlet, you have shitty outlets sometimes to deal with the stress of the job.
Yeah.
But jump in, that gets taken away.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to cover off, because we've mentioned these words, I've used them before, that they're bloody adjectives. So I just want to sort of cover that a little bit while we're talking about it before we move on to the rest. So the fact is that we use dark humour and we've spoken about it heaps of times in the podcast, where you're dealing with a traumatic incident and you use dark humour to deal with that incident. We dealt with a hell of a lot of Indigenous crime in the Northern Territory, an incredible amount. We protected with our own risked our own safety to protect Indigenous victims. We deliberately made sure we removed vulnerable people from certain situations when we knew that there was going to be an issue with them. So, potential issue for their safety. So we would still use words in the private of the muster room or the private of a conversation in a car or something like that would sound bad. But guess what? So does everybody who deals in situations that are traumatic. Look at all the military deployments, how they've spoken about people. And, we're not really comparing military to police because there's massive differences, but you sort of you use words to blow off steam. I don't judge people by words. Remember, in the Northern Territory, police officers can't be offended by words because words don't hurt. So I judge people by actions. If I turned up with a police officer and they were saying, like, these black bastards, blah, 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 I was like, whoa, what? It's because they're potentially actions. They're going to go and carry out racist actions. I never heard that. We were just going to another job. It was, mate, if you're a proper racist, there is no way in Christ you could work in the Northern Territory as a police officer. For one, your predisposition to disliking someone for the colour of their skin, for one, that's just ridiculous. If you're judging somebody by their race, then you're a subhuman as far as I'm concerned, because we're all human. Like, we're all human beings, and that's where words don't hurt. We need to get back to that. It's not like you walk down the street throwing racist slurs around. It was a private conversation. I'm not bloody justifying stuff. I've said bad things. Schultzy said bad things. You've got text messages, whatever. all humans do this, and I just wanted to cover that and say, like, these are words because your actions were not racist. Sorry, Schultzy, you go.
Yeah, mate. Look, the thing is, what anybody said, and like I said in private, and Damo, you're dead right there. The fact is, what people need to understand, the fact, how many times have we received every single shift stuff about our white, you're white, you racist F, like white C, like honestly, it just keeps on going. Like you just can't, like in a shift, you would hear it 100 times, every single time. And it's so you then look at it and go, well, who's actually the racist here? We hardly mention it. We might mention it to a few things. And look, honestly, people are going to attack me all they want. I have more blackfella friends than probably most people actually listening to this because Damo and I have both been, adopted into Aboriginal families. My first wife was part Aboriginal in Torres Straits, and I lived in Torres Straits. And I was asked to be best man in a Torres Strait Islander, and him and I would joke all the time about being white and black and all that. There was no offence to it. All it is it's just describing something, and it doesn't mean you're actually purely racist. We have copped far more than what we have ever said. So that's what people need to understand. There's also one other point, Zach, you're talking about DVs. DVs, I was in charge of the family and domestic violence unit in Katherine for a number of years, or probably about a year. And I actually had to investigate domestics between Aboriginals and their partners, or ACPOs, Aboriginal Community Police Officers and their partners. You have to be very careful about how you tread, because the problem is if they've seen as giving something against, say, a female ACPO, and if they're seen as actually giving evidence against their partner, they can actually cop, what would you call it, punishment from the Aboriginal, because payback, because she's spoken out against her partner. This is stuff we jump around this all the time, and we do what we best, and we act in good faith, like Damo said before. We try and minimise the outcome, but we do it truthfully. We do it with the evidence, and we do it discreetly, or to make sure the outcome is what's expected in the community. The mind blows. If you actually went into every police officer in the NT and went through their phone, I guarantee there would be something in there saying something along the lines of what you've said. However, whether you mean it in a derogatory way or whether you're just saying it because that's the way they talk to us. How do you?
And that's the thing. Like, well, I think, and there's even like psychological studies that have been accepted and peer reviewed about this. So there's one in particular that shows the point that we're all saying very well. They've got a group of psychology students who are studying psychology, and they gave the groups individually a number of words to fill in, and there's a word with say 5-10 letters, but a lot of the letters are removed, and then so you can make up a number of different words with whatever comes to mind. So what they found was everyone does it individually, and then they get asked what they meant by that. So a lot of the guys and girls would write things like grey, sad, down, and they were, what does that mean? And often the response by the person filling in the words was, the first word came to mind because of this, and then it just kind of stuck down that path. It didn't mean anything. Then they get shown other people's, and keeping in mind they're psychology students in a psychology test that they know that they're a part of, and they've just answered that their answers mean nothing because they saw something grey and then that's where they went, and then they went down that path. They were then shown other people their responses and said, well, what does this tell you about them? And instead of going, well, it doesn't mean anything probably because they probably saw something, they go, well, this shows that person's arrogant. They want to be a winner. They're depressed, kind of thing like that. So there's this lack of understanding of humans that's occurring, even in students that are studying psychology, even though when they know that they're being examined. And the standard thing is that you think someone means more from what they say than when you say things. Because there's been instances where like there's female detectives who having a conversation at one point say that there's a group of people who should be all basically de-sexed. And then 5 minutes later they're saying, oh, I'm so disappointed in what Zach said. Like, how disgusting. And they're like, what? You just said a group of humans based on race should be de-sexed. And they're like, and she goes, oh, but I'm joking. Well, maybe I didn't mean anything. So I agree, like, sorry, I'm just taking my jumper off. I agree completely. And the thing is, the text messages that were sent to the public, it was implied in a way that they were all mine, but a lot of them were sent to me. The worst ones were sent to me. I said one racial slur. And again, that was in response to, I went to a job, and it was one of the most probably traumatic jobs that I'd gone through. In response to that, my battle buddy from Afghan, who had since joined the NT police after me, he sent me a message being like, mate, are you okay? You heard you had a rough one. I feel like him to send me that message, like with what me and him have gone through, it's a bad job. I've sent him a response using a racial slur, kind of like going, like throwing it off, trying to be like, stoic and whatever, going like, no big deal, in a way to deal with it, like we've been saying, to deal with trauma. But again, on one hand, dealing with trauma that turns into you breaking. Okay, I'll keep going back to it because it's an easy juxtaposition to make. You dealing with trauma one way equals you breaking a young girl's arm with a metal bar. Fine, acceptable, understandable. Empathy gets given to you. Me dealing with trauma privately, saying one racial slur out of thousands of messages you've taken from my phone, and I'm like the worst guy you've ever dealt with. And keep in mind, this is another reason that I was so like against the whole coronial process. I'm dealing with defense lawyers who defend pedophiles, who defend rapists, who, if I was to pay them money, would say anything they could to defend me. And they would say whatever I wanted them to say if I paid them.
Yep.
But someone else has paid them, so they're going to say this kind of stuff. And on one time, I'm like, well, you're all snakes.
Yeah.
You defend pedos and rapists and actual abusers, and you do it in front of me in this case. But you're going to pretend like you're so offended by a couple words. So that was the biggest basis of the coronial. And then we're going down. I didn't give evidence for a couple years. Throughout the process, we keep hearing some worse and worse things. At some point, we made a complaint of bias against the coroner, that she was acting in a biased manner, including the way that she had gone out to Yundum in the first part, the way that she was accepting some evidence, not accepting other evidence. It got to the point where one of my lawyers, he basically just he was unable to operate in the coronial because he was my defense lawyer, my main defense lawyer in the criminal trial. But every time he stood up to object, to give evidence, to cross-examine, he was shut down completely. So he was unable to do his job. So he had to leave, and 6 days before I ended up giving evidence, we had to find a new lawyer because he was made ineffective because he was shut down so much by the coroner. So we made in about the middle of the coronial, we made a complaint of bias that the coroner should recuse herself. Unfortunately, in that system, that complaint of bias goes to the coroner.
To the coroner.
And the coroner and she made the decision that a lay person wouldn't have found her actions to be biased, and therefore she's not going to remove herself. So then we continue on with the coronial. Throughout the coronial, there's obviously like an acceptance of I said it again, there's an acceptance of some evidence. For example, the Sarge that was out at Yuendamu that night. We talked about it again in the criminal case. The very last thing that she had to get asked, or she was asked in her re-examination by the Crown prosecutor in the criminal case, was, Sergeant so-and-so, you didn't intentionally not tell the truth, did you? To which she replied, no, I didn't intentionally not tell the truth. So that was the last question because she'd got found out for not telling the truth. Yet in the coronial, that didn't matter that was still like her story, the non-truth story was accepted. So it went from her notes saying, she instructed us to go out with a zero tolerance approach and effect the arrest, I believe. It got to the point that Coronial was accepted that her latest version of events was that she wanted us to go out and play basketball with the community overnight. And that was accepted. There was a number of other things she told about the narrative, for example, that she gave the briefing to the all four of us IRT and the dog handler, but the CCTV from the footage shows me giving it to her. It shows me giving it to the boys. Now, that was in the Coronial findings. Obviously, she said something that was not true, which is fine. She might not have remembered. She might have misremembered. But she was treated with so easily. Like, she was tired. She spoke wrong. She didn't tell the truth, but there's all these reasons why she wouldn't have told the truth. And, like, poor her. Whereas, again, you don't get any of that empathy on my side. One of the biggest things, obviously, there was the text messages. And then against me, there was a claim made by a judge years before. He made in his findings of a case of a resist arrest job that he said in the court in his findings of the case that I'd lied in my evidence. And I remember that job. And I remember what had occurred, and basically I wasn't fazed by that judge saying that. And they couldn't comprehend that I wasn't fazed by it. Because they said the judge has made these findings. Like, the judge is just a human. And this is what occurred. He hasn't seen all the evidence. For whatever reason, the prosecutor didn't call the witnesses that corroborate my story. That claim of, so let's say that's an allegation of perjury, it never went anywhere, or never turned into a charge or an internal discipline or anything like that. That was investigated 3 times, at least 3 times. It was cleared by professional standard command because, and the same reasons this is why it was cleared, that we had a junior prosecutor that didn't call all the witnesses, and she didn't call the witnesses that corroborated my story. That's why. So I was cleared by professional standard command. I was cleared by crime and got sent to crime twice. Got to the point where crime, the head of crime at the time, the superintendent, and we have the memo, sent back to PSC going, stop wasting my time with this case, with this file. There is no evidence at all that he lied. Here's all the evidence that suggests that he was telling the truth, the corroborating evidence that wasn't put to the judge. It's like, basically, stop wasting our time. It ended up going to the head of PSC, who cleared me himself and gave evidence in the Coronial that the judge was wrong. But what gets used is the key point that a judge said that I'd alleged that I'd lied in court. So they kept focusing on these one little points. It was the whole point was to find negative things about me and to paint me in a negative way. For example, that the text messages. I've never had a complaint from a citizen of racism, and I had a small number of complaints compared to the average in Alice Springs. I'd also had actually commendations from not only female police officers who were in charge of bush stations, but from female doctors, heads of departments in the Alice Springs Hospital, who'd sent commendations, not to me, but via email to the commander of Alice Springs, for assisting in cases, one in particular, well, there's multiple, but one in particular where an Indigenous 12-year-old had been brought in for attempting suicide and self-harm. He was there at like 1, 2 a.m. or something like that. Me and my partner attended. We'd attended the hospital for another reason, to drop someone off. And we found the hospital staff struggling with this 12-year-old. They couldn't do anything. They didn't know what to do. He was in their custody at this point, or in their care, trying to inflict self-harm, and they could do it. Normally in a situation like this, sometimes you'd hold him down, cuff him to the bed. The hospital staff did not know what to do. They were at their wits' end. So I ended up holding the boy and hugging the boy for hours until he fell asleep. And once he fell asleep, left him in the care of the security guard and my partner. And then I went into the town camps, and I was going house to house to house, 2 or 3 a.m., until I found one sober grandma to bring her back to the station. And you know how it was in Alice, and probably in Catherine as well. You are such a team with the hospital department, on most of them, with the ambos and the security guards and all that kind of stuff. while I went out and brought the grandma back, the security guard then went to Macca's with his own money to, buy this little boy a feed and his grandma a feed. And so we're all looking after, all of us looking after this kid who happened to be Indigenous. And the only reason I bring that up is because that there's evidence of me being commended for helping an Indigenous person. Mm-hmm. There's no evidence of me acting in a racially biased way against anyone. In fact, as we've talked about before, the two people I've saved their lives of and got medals for were Asian.
Yeah.
So, and even that, the whole negative sway of it was that the NT police ended up using that instance of saving those two tourists as an example of me being basically foolhardy, reckless, and wanting glory. So anything they could, they looked at it in a biased manner. And basically it got to the point where I'm being forced to give evidence in the witness box. So I knew I was going to go up there, and I was booked in for the whole week. So for 5 days, and for the murder trial, I was in the box for 3 days, and that included cross-examination. And the Coronial, I was booked in for 5 days, and I knew it. There was 8 legal teams, 6 of which wanted to just have their say of trying to kind of embarrass me in that. And throughout this process, obviously, there's been a lot of cops give evidence, a lot of cops, and the narrative was being put to the cops. And there's just so many instances of it was just so obvious, if the coroner's counsel assisting, if you answered in the way she wanted you to answer, she'd be kind to you. If you answered in the way that truthfully but wasn't what she wanted, she would try and destroy you. And a lot of cops find it hard being in that witness box in that situation, because it's not our job. It's not anyone's job. No one's going to feel comfortable up in that job, in that position. So a lot of cops did roll over for her, in my view, completely roll over and lie and say whatever she wanted them to say, because it was so obvious what was wanted. And she'd obviously proofed a lot of the boys beforehand. So it was just super obvious in that way. In regard to witnesses, so they got to the point where they'd actually found the cops had gone to an ex-girlfriend of mine that used to be in the police temporarily, and they got her to give bad character evidence against me. And again, PSC, the head of PSC, I believe he's an assistant commissioner, he gave evidence that she was a non-reliable witness. There was a number of lies found amongst her statement, because I think the coroner kind of put it to them, why didn't you use this elsewhere? Why didn't you use this internally or something like that? And the PSC was the head of PSC was mate, there's that many lies in her statement. She's an unreliable witness. Despite that finding, her evidence was used as gospel. The NT police then went to another female officer to try and find corroborating character or bad character evidence against me. And this is where it gets wild, even wilder. That female police officer kind of refused to give back. She's like, no, Zach's a good dude. What she's saying, not true. They then sat her down and they showed her text messages that weren't used in, obviously none of the text messages were used in the criminal trial, but they showed her text messages that weren't used in the Coronial at all, but they showed her messages purely that they thought would kind of rile her up and make her angry against me. And she still refused to give bad character evidence against me. So then we said, my legal team, well, we heard about this through her and other chains. So we were going to call her as character evidence to counter this other cop, and to show that the police have, pro evidence against me, but they're not using it. When we put her on the witness list, my lawyer gets pulled aside by the coroner's counsel assisting. And she tells them that, hey, if you call her, it's going to be bad for her, because the NT police have gone and created a dirt file. They've only told me, none of the other parties know about it. It's just our little secret. But if she goes on the stand, we're going to have to humiliate her and tear her apart. Obviously, we're not going to do that. But we know about that. She told my lawyer. She probably thinks she's probably used to people not having the balls to talk about this stuff out in the public, but I'm not scared of lawyers. Mm-hmm. So we obviously didn't call her, but you can see how the cops and the coroner, or the coronials, the coroner's counsel assisting, they're all part of this little biased little team with a common end goal, I guess. So that's one like stark example of what had occurred. There was another example of a witness giving evidence again that the head of Aboriginal Justice in the NT, who was in that meeting with the head of ICAC when the day before I was arrested, or the day that I was arrested, and he ordered the cops to arrest me. And there's never been an explanation or a question as to why she was there. And now she's got this high up position within the NT cops. So she gave evidence, and she never mentioned that occurring. And she was the only witness, I think, that requested a certificate of immunity before she gave evidence. So it's that, like, there's all this weird shit going on, but it gets to the point basically where I'm being forced to give evidence, and I don't want to give evidence because I know what it is. It's going to be, as I've said before, it's going to be all these lawyers with all this prep time, and they're going to think they're like legends, and they're going to have one question after the other designed to just embarrass me, trip me up, and try to make me look like a fool. And nothing that I say is going to matter. And that's what it was. That's what it turned out to be. It was just this session where I sat there for 5 days and just, they kept throwing the narrative at me. And every time I pulled a point, like I gave evidence that contradicted the narrative, it didn't matter. It was just like, oh, strike off that one, move on to the next one. Because it was just like point. And I knew if I gave evidence, because again, like I'm there in the box under oath, like I've got to tell the truth. But we all know how it is. Like, if you're going to come for me, like I'm going to come for you as well. Like if you're fighting me, I'll fight back. That's all I know how to do.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to tell the truth, but it's going to hurt, like the whole Coronial did. It's going to hurt the cops. It's going to hurt the lawyers. It's going to hurt the coroner. It's going to hurt the police force and the community. Which is what I think we all. And this is what I wanted to mention earlier, Schultzy. You brought up a good point about the text messages. Was that this was private? This was completely private, and it didn't, between me, the people I was texting it to, it meant zero.
Yeah.
The psychological studies would support that, but it would also support that other people looking in would think it meant something more than it did.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with lawyers who are being paid hundreds and $100 an hour that should be intelligent enough, or get a psychological expert in to discuss this matter rather than just like coming up to decisions themselves. One of the things I said when I eventually did give evidence was that the coroner, or the counsel assisting the coroner, was willing to damage the community and the police force in order to try and damage me, because I knew that those text messages, I knew they meant nothing. The mates I sent them to knew that they meant nothing. The coroner's counsel, I think, is smart enough to understand that they meant nothing. But she and the police force and a number of other lawyers on these teams agreed to and supported them being released to the public, knowing the damage that would cause the community, knowing that would cause damage to the police force as well. So I had a little crack because I was like, you release these messages knowing that they had nothing to do with the shooting. And the report finds at the end, there's no evidence that says that any of these racial related messages have anything to do with the shooting. The police changed their tone completely as well and said, look, we think Zach's racist, but the racism had nothing to do with the shooting. So we all come to the agreement that the text messages meant nothing. But again, they were willing to cause all that pain to the community, to the police force, in order to try and embarrass me. And that's all that week was for me in the box. They were just trying to embarrass me. And I was there, and I'm fine. I know who I am. I'm proud of who I am. I've got enough friends, and I'm fine with a bunch of lawyers who I think, in my heart of heart, mostly are snakes and scumbags. Like, if you want to have a crack at me, fine. Like, I can sit there and take it. But it was just a chance for them to embarrass me if they could. But again, I'm good with who I am. So we were there, and again, they were throwing things at me, and I would, like, where I could, provide evidence where the narrative was incorrect. But every time I did that, they would just go on to the next question. The biggest part of that was there was a couple. There was one good thing where a point kept coming up where evidence this is an example of where people just agree to answer the way in which the coroner's counsel assisting would want them to. there was a point there was multiple points throughout the Coronial where the person, whoever the witness was on the stand, was asked, often cops who were working out there, were asked if they knew that Kumanjai Walker was deaf in one ear. Every single cop responded, yes, we knew that. We knew he was deaf in one ear. But then the question was put to me, and obviously I've looked through all the evidence of the crim trial. Part of the crim trial was his medical history. There was no mention at all that I found of him being deaf in one ear. There was mention of him when he was a child, and this shows part of his poor upbringing, and like you should feel sympathy for him. And he did have a hard upbringing, but there was a point in his life when he was a young child where he had issues with one of his ears, and he kept being taken to the Unimog clinic by his family, by his carers. The Unimog clinic kept making appointments with the ear specialist in Alice Springs and saying, hey, you need to take him to the ear specialist in Alice Springs. For 9 months, they didn't do it. Eventually, the ear specialist comes out, assesses his ear. He's had a rock stuck in his ear for 9 months. Removes the rock with tweezers, problem done. So when I was asked that question about him being deaf in one ear, I responded with, well, show me the evidence. Where is the evidence of this? Because I've only seen evidence of this. I didn't get shown the evidence. What the lawyers do is then go, well, you would accept then that people say he's deaf in one ear. So that's how the narrative kept being brought back to that. And then, so I kept kind of getting like, again, I was just giving evidence. One of the lawyers hit me up and he goes, because there's all this talk about, and we were talking about racism before. I believe the NT government and the NT police force and the coroner and the coroner's council assisting and some of the lawyers in the party, I believe they do hold, the people in charge hold some racist views that they think are not racist. They think they're being, I believe they think they're making up for past discrimination by introducing current or present discrimination. We're not understanding that that'll lead to future discrimination. Because, for example, like a watch house rule, we treat every Indigenous person as if they're a vulnerable person. We treat someone different based off race. Easily done. That is a racist law. We'll be treating someone like they're vulnerable based off their race. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is look at the judgments in the NT in the court system about the sentencing differences between Indigenous based off, let's say based off potentially culture. Look at we talked about the other day, the last episode, I believe, the 28-year-old who got done for rape and assault of a 13-year-old. Exceptionally minor sentencing. It happens. There's a lot of examples of that, and I think we all know that in the NT, but that doesn't come from us on the ground. But the othering that occurs high up, and it trickles down. It causes a divide, and the Coronial caused a massive divide, even more so. But it got to the point where one of these discussion points was, instead of thinking about like what the debrief actually should have been, like what did we do well, what could have been done better. For example, comms can always be improved, and the comms after the shooting was horrible between like the chain of command up and down. We didn't discuss about the medical equipment that could have been done better, or the systems in place for if, for example, nurses evacuate communities, can we have an AMBO attachment potentially?
In thinking.
None of this was discussed. What was discussed, a big point, was should we have ACPOs to arrest us? So when we go to arrest an Aboriginal person, should we always bring an Aboriginal person with us? Mm. But again, we go, well, do we do that for Chinese people? Do we do that for other people of any other races? No. It's a weird racist thing to discuss. But we brought that up, and I remember one of the lawyers, and this is where the Coronial goes so... Because there were some points where everyone might think that I'm like being a bit like a conspiracy theorist about the Coronial. But this is a really good point. One of the lawyers for the families hit me up and goes, well, the point was being made, like, shouldn't an ACPO be made, or shouldn't he have been there when the arrest was in place? And obviously no one was ballsy enough to talk about how, well, this specific ACPO, is he actually good at his job? Everyone just goes, oh, he's a unicorn, he's the best in his job in the world. We're not going to talk about, let's actually look at how good he is at his job, because everyone's different. Some are good, some are bad. Some people are good at their job, some people are bad at their job. Some people never shop to work, some people do shop to work. But it was being put to me, shouldn't an ACPO have been there to affect the arrest of Walker? Because wouldn't Walker be more comfortable with a person of Aboriginality close to him in relationship wise, there's less risk of violence. And I said, well, hey, if you look at all Walker's victims, the majority of them are Aboriginals, the victims of violence. The majority of victims of violence have a close relationship to him. And the lawyer literally says this, oh, you win that one. And everyone in the courtroom heard it.
God.
One of the boys looks at the transcript the next day where he says, you win that one, inaudible. Mm. So my lawyer legitimately makes a point of it, raises his hand. Hey, there's an issue with the transcript from yesterday. We all heard this lawyer say you win this one, but it's inaudible in the transcript. And the coroner goes, oh yeah, he sent us an email, we'll fix it up. Email sent. To this day, that transcript's not been fixed up. So there's all these things happening in the background that you're going, oh, like, come on, what's occurring?
Mate.
But it gets to the point. Oh, sorry, Schultzy.
Yeah, mate. Sorry. Like you just raised a whole heap of things. Let's go back to dirt files. So you're talking about cops, and I said, look, if you wanted to look through everybody in the NT police, you'd find something. If the police force honestly wanted to destroy someone, they can just go through and find something that we haven't done something slightly towards general orders and all that sort of thing. I was a big advocate in saying as long as you can justify what you do, you're fine. Because general orders are written in a specific way for a certain incident. So if you go to something that's slightly outside the realm of what that general order is written about, but if you act in good faith, and Damo said that before, then you're fine. Because general orders, they're a guideline. They are not rule of law. So if somebody wants to destroy, honestly, in the police force, if they want to destroy me, if they want to go through my file, you know what, go ahead. But I'll tell you what, bring up all the good shit I did as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I say a lot. I say, well, for the anti-police and the Coronial team, they made it fairly clear that they had a goal to destroy me, to find me guilty for something. I have no convictions. Internal findings, remedial guidance. For the shooting, remedial guidance. And as we were saying, it is so easy to find someone having commit an unlawful act, however minor, or a disciplinary act, however minor. I'm clear. But if you look at the narrative that's been put forward by the NT police predominantly and accepted by the coroner and pushed to the media, you'd imagine that I must have been found guilty of all these excessive use of force jobs. None. None. They got reopened one after the other. Cleared. Opened again. Cleared. Yep. So they've gone through my whole phone. Again, I've got no convictions. So if anyone, and I say a lot, like if you judge everyone to the same standard, you judge me, and you call me you demonize me again, we'll go back to text messages or alleged use of force being excessive that's never been found to be a thing. What is someone who bashes a woman? Because you bash a woman in the NT, you can get a job on the board of NAJA by bashing a pregnant woman, that guy's probably sent some bad text messages.
Yeah.
It's just, different standards,
The thing is, Zach, can I just ask a quick question before Damo goes on? Mate, did they ever bring up in the Coronial the fact that you'd saved 2 international people in floodwater?
I don't think they ever brought it up to me. They brought it up to me. Oh, sorry, the NT police brought it up to me, but they brought it up to me as saying that was a point that kind of made me angry. You're angry at the NT police, aren't you? Because they never gave you a medal. Not the case. And then they used it in their closing summary, I guess. Closing submissions. The NT police used it as a point to say that that was an example of where I showed, it was a negative example of me. It showed that Zach was a reckless, basically chasing glory. And that's what I think we've talked about it before briefly, saying that they're pushing this position where I should have sat on the side of that river and watched 2 people die. Or should I put myself in danger? But they're saying that they're promoting the policing that does not put themselves between danger and the victim.
So hold on. So in the Coronial, they're admitting that you put yourself in danger, but when they actually gave you the ward, they're trying to limit the amount of danger you put yourself in.
Well, see, the police never gave me an award. The police have never recognised what occurred that day for me or the Sarge. It came from Australia, the Australian government, and from the Hong Kong government, because it became aware of the government, I guess, through the media, because there was that journal out there. So to this day, I think me and that Sarge on that day were the only cops in Australian history to receive bravery medals from the government for an action on duty that's never been recognised by the police force.
Yeah,
you can't go from one and then the other. You can't.
I know.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Bloody hell! Oh, we've got a dirt. I want to go way back, but we've got a dirt file on this girl. So bloody. So, what? My God, is that stalking? Like what?
Yeah.
Why is she under investigation? What has she done that she needs to be investigated? That's my first point. Like, how many rabbit holes are we going to go down?
Exactly.
Talking about the bravery stuff. Under the Police Administration Act, you've got why did the police force exist? What is this thing called the police force? Well, it's defined. There's a definition of the police force exists. There is an organisation in the Northern Territory called the Northern Territory Police Force, and their role is very first one, number one in the Police Administration Act is protection of life and property. Number one, and then it goes on to detection of crime, prevention of crime, all the rest of the other functions of policing. But the number one reason that the police force exists is the protection of life and property. So they wanted you to sit on the side of the road, on the side of a river, and not protect life.
And I couldn't live with myself if I did that. You know,
no, neither could
I couldn't live with myself personally.
Mate,
so
no good cop could.
Exactly. No good cop could.
No, you're 100% correct, mate. No good cop could. And look, I think what we need to do is we might pause it there. We might cut it off for another week following those comments, but we've got the second half of the Coronial outcome with Zach Rolfe in relation to the death of Kumanjai Walker, and we'll cover that next week. We want to keep these to a point where you can listen to them. So that's what we've done. We're going to cut this one, and we'll be back. But what do you got, Schultzy?
Yeah, mate. We will be back next week with the second half of this of the Coronial outcome, or especially what Zach thought of it and what we think of it. But mate, tomorrow it's a pretty exciting day for us because we will be at the Gold Coast Tavern at 12 p.m. Basically doing our first live show. So hope to see you there. And it's going to be a good day. We've bought some new recording equipment, so hopefully it all works well. And we'll go from there. But hopefully we'll see you there. And Damo, I reckon that's it, mate, for this week.
Absolutely, yeah. So come down from about 12. We'll probably kick off about 1 on a recording. We'll get everyone together and say good day and have a few beers. But yeah, really looking forward to that tomorrow morning. So we'll see you then, and we'll be back next week with the second half.
All right, we'll see you then.